A ranch can look like the finish line, but sometimes the beautiful part is just the wrapper, and the actual business hiding inside is far more demanding than most buyers expect. The fantasy is peace, space, and self-reliance. The reality can be repairs, weather, labor, debt service, and long stretches where cash leaves faster than it arrives. So here's the real question. If the day-to-day math is often this tough, why do sophisticated buyers still want ranches at all? To answer that, we need to separate the scenery from the economics. Most people first meet ranching as a feeling, not a business model. Space suggests freedom. Animals suggest income. But a large land operation should be judged less like a dream home and more like an enterprise with unusual risks and very slow feedback. That shift matters. A ranch is not just scenery plus cattle. It's land, water access, infrastructure, equipment, labor systems, legal constraints, and biological uncertainty bundled into one capital-heavy package. Once you see that package clearly, the romantic image starts losing some of its power. The purchase price is only the visible number. Serious ownership usually demands more cash than the listing implies, because buying the land is just the admission step. You still need liquidity for upgrades, setbacks, operating losses, and time before the property begins behaving the way you hoped. Cheap acreage can be financially expensive. Expensive acreage can sometimes be operationally cheaper. That sounds backward until you realize that the real question is not how many acres you bought, but how much usable production, dependable water, and flexibility those acres actually deliver. Large numbers impress people. Productive numbers pay bills. A parcel can look enormous on paper and still offer surprisingly little practical output once you account for terrain, forage quality, distance from water, erosion issues, or sections that are simply hard to manage. Water changes everything. A pretty property without reliable water can become a very costly puzzle. A less glamorous property with strong water access can be far more resilient. In land businesses, control of a critical input often matters more than the postcard quality of the view. And once the money goes in, it usually stays in. Ranch ownership can lock large amounts of capital into something slow-moving, location-specific, and expensive to improve. That does not make it bad. It just means the bar for entering should be much higher than aesthetic appeal. Now the invisible layer begins. Boundaries on a map feel neat and finished, but real boundaries are wire, posts, gates, corners, labor, terrain, and maintenance. Every extra stretch of perimeter creates another future obligation, and future obligations are where capex-heavy properties quietly drain optimism. A fence is not a one-time victory. It's a recurring promise to your future self. Storms, wildlife, rust, ground movement, and simple age all get a vote. On a ranch, maintenance is not background noise. Maintenance is part of the operating model. Water systems bring the same lesson. Troughs, pumps, tanks, lines, and backup solutions sound like details until one fails in bad weather. Then they become urgent, expensive, and non-negotiable. The farther the ranch is from town, the more every small infrastructure problem starts behaving like a major one. Animal handling facilities are another example. To outsiders, they can look like utilitarian clutter. To operators, they shape labor efficiency, animal stress, safety, and loss. A poorly designed setup costs money slowly. A good setup costs money immediately. Either way, the bill arrives. Storage seems boring until feed gets wet, supplies disappear, or equipment sits unprotected through harsh seasons. Then, boring turns expensive. Ranches are full of these hidden thresholds, where an owner can save money up front only to spend more later through spoilage, repair, or lost efficiency. If the property is remote, labor support becomes its own capital story. Housing, utilities, transportation, and retention all matter more when skilled help is hard to find. A ranch can be operationally simple on paper and still become complicated because the human system around it is fragile. Equipment expands the same pattern. Machines save labor, but they introduce depreciation, parts, breakdown risk, and diesel dependency. And because ranches cover distance, machines do not just add convenience, they become essential.
Once something becomes essential, failure is no longer merely annoying, it becomes costly. Then there's protection against the things you hope never happen. Liability, weather damage, fire exposure, equipment loss, and visitor risk may not create cinematic scenes, but they absolutely shape the economics. A property with more moving parts often carries more ways for one bad incident to become a big expense. Land also comes with rules. Access rights, use restrictions, environmental obligations, and local permitting can all shape what the ranch really is, not what the brochure implied. A buyer may think they purchased freedom, then discover they mostly purchased responsibility with a scenic backdrop. By this point, the main reveal is already visible. Long before the first animal is sold or the first guest checks in, capital has stacked itself into layer after layer of obligation. The ranch may still be valuable, but it is no longer innocent.
Buying animals can feel like the moment the ranch finally becomes real. Economically, it's the moment complexity accelerates. Livestock are inventory, biology, and risk all at once. They require timing, care, records, and constant adaptation to conditions the owner only partly controls. Even herd quality takes patience. Genetics influence outcomes, but they do not rescue weak economics overnight. Better breeding decisions can improve consistency over time, yet that time horizon matters. In ranching, many important improvements are gradual, which means they compete against very immediate expenses. Basic animal care is relentless in the most practical way. Feed supplements, veterinary work, vaccinations, reproductive management, and loss prevention do not wait for favorable market prices. The herd needs attention when it needs attention, which means expenses can stay firm even while revenue turns uncertain. Ranch labor is also easy to underestimate because it is spread across many small necessities. You are not just paying for hours, you are paying for attentiveness, judgment, reliability, and experience in a setting where mistakes can become losses surprisingly fast. The machines return here too, because livestock operations lean on them constantly. A ranch may appear timeless, but its functionality depends on very modern equipment cycles. Iron wears out, tires age, fuel rises, repairs bunch together. The timeless image is usually propped up by timely spending. Cash flow timing is one of the least glamorous but most important realities. Expenses often arrive continuously, while income may arrive in bursts. When a business pays out steadily but gets paid irregularly, working capital becomes a survival tool rather than just a bookkeeping concept. That's why liquidity matters so much. Owners can be technically wealthy on paper and still feel squeezed if most of their capital is trapped in land while operations keep asking for cash. On properties like these, reserves are not optional polish, they are part of the core architecture. Debt can make that architecture more fragile. Financing may help a buyer gain control of a property, but it also introduces a fixed claim on an inherently variable operation. When your revenue depends on markets, weather, and biology, fixed obligations become much heavier than they first appear. Another hard lesson is that ranch surprises rarely arrive one at a time. A repair often meets a weather issue, which overlaps with a labor problem, which then collides with an unfavorable sale window. Costs like to cluster. Clustering is how a manageable year turns into a disappointing one. This is where the economics start feeling unintuitive to outsiders. You can work extremely hard, run a decent operation, avoid major disasters, and still end up with only modest operating returns. In many cases, the business is not broken, it is simply structurally thin. That structural thinness begins with pricing power, or the lack of it. Commodity production usually means you are selling into a market that does not care much about your personal story, your property's beauty, or how emotionally invested you are in the operation. When price is discovered in the market, discipline still matters, but it does not guarantee comfort. You can improve timing, quality, and management, yet you are still exposed to a broader pricing machine. That machine can be fair, but it is rarely sentimental and never designed around one owner's needs. Meanwhile, inputs can climb faster than output values. Fuel, feed, freight, and services all have their own economic lives. When those lines move against you, the squeeze is immediate. The ranch does not get extra credit for being hardworking. It simply absorbs the spread. Biology also sets a stubborn pace.
In software, you can sometimes iterate quickly. In ranching, many decisions move at the speed of seasons, breeding cycles, and recovery time. That slower clock makes errors harder to correct and good decisions slower to visibly reward. Weather can overpower your spreadsheet with brutal simplicity. When forage weakens, carrying capacity changes, and when carrying capacity changes, the whole operating plan has to respond. Drought is not just a bad season, it can force expensive decisions that echo far beyond the year itself.
Animal health adds another kind of volatility because it blends cost, stress, and timing. Even when problems are contained, they can disrupt schedules, reduce confidence, and force unplanned spending. A living inventory can create value, but it also comes with vulnerabilities that steel and concrete do not. And some losses come from the edges. A storm, a gate failure, a predator event, or a transport problem can create consequences out of proportion to how small the original trigger seemed. Ranches often punish weak points, and weak points are rarely visible during a calm afternoon tour. Market timing can help, but it is not complete control. Animals reach sale windows on biological schedules, while buyers and price conditions move on market schedules. When those clocks line up, owners feel smart. When they do not, even competent decisions can look mediocre on the final statement. There are ways to reduce some exposure, of course. Planning, contracts, hedging tools, and better data can all improve decision quality. But reduce is not eliminate. A ranch remains a business where multiple variables can still turn against you at the same time. That is why people inside agriculture often sound more sober than people outside it. They know a ranch does not need a dramatic disaster to disappoint. Sometimes one rough year simply undoes the quiet progress of several ordinary ones. That asymmetry changes how serious owners think.
This is also where ranch ownership separates admiration from aptitude. Enjoying the land is one thing, operating it well is another. Many buyers are drawn by the visible symbols of capability, only to discover that actual capability is quieter, more technical, and much less photogenic. Distance can make that gap even wider. A remote owner may imagine the ranch as a stable asset, while the local reality changes week by week. Without strong management and trust, the property can become a place where assumptions stay polished and problems stay expensive. Some owners try to improve the math by changing the business model entirely. A guest ranch, for example, is not just a ranch with visitors. It becomes a hospitality operation, which introduces customer expectations, staffing complexity, marketing costs, and a different kind of seasonality. That model can generate stronger revenue per visitor than commodity livestock ever could, but it earns that potential through service excellence, not romance alone. In other words, you did not escape complexity. You simply traded agricultural complexity for hospitality complexity. Another path is niche positioning, direct-to-consumer beef, specialty breeding, or a regional premium brand. That can create more pricing power, but only if the operation can also handle processing coordination, customer trust, distribution, and the discipline of running a real brand, not just a ranch. And that's the catch with alternatives. They may improve margin, but they often reduce simplicity. The ranch stops being only a production system and starts requiring stronger sales, marketing, branding, and relationship management. Better economics may be possible, yet they usually come bundled with harder execution. Many owners therefore build smaller supporting income streams around the property. Hay, grazing leases, or carefully matched local uses can help smooth cash flow. The key word is help. These streams can stabilize the ranch, but they rarely transform weak economics into effortless strength on their own. Hunting access is another example. In the right setting, it can create meaningful revenue from the land itself rather than from livestock alone. But again, useful does not mean passive. Wildlife management, liability awareness, relationships, and timing all shape whether this becomes a durable advantage or just a nice idea. Some properties also support filming, events, workshops, or other limited uses that monetize the setting directly. That can be smart when done carefully, but every added use means another layer of coordination. The property becomes more versatile, yes, but also more managerial. So diversification helps, but it should not be romanticized either. Multiple revenue streams are valuable precisely because the core business can be volatile. They add resilience by adding complexity. The ranch improves when it becomes more multidimensional, but multidimensional properties ask more of their owners.
And this is the turning point in the story. For many sophisticated buyers, the ranch is not justified mainly by annual operating profit. It is justified by the land itself, a scarce, tangible asset that may preserve value, appreciate over long periods, and hold strategic appeal beyond agriculture. That view becomes especially attractive when buyers worry about inflation, currency dilution, or the fragility of purely financial assets. Productive land is physical. It can be touched, managed, improved, and held. For some capital, that physicality is part of the appeal, even when current operating income is unremarkable. Privacy matters too, and wealthy buyers often price privacy differently than everyone else. A ranch can offer space, control, recreation, and insulation from crowded markets in a way suburban real estate cannot. Those benefits may not show up neatly on an operating statement, but they still influence willingness to pay. Scale can also create strategic value independent of cattle. A parcel that connects water, access, habitat, or adjoining acreage may be worth more to the right future buyer than its current operating income suggests. In that sense, land can carry optionality that livestock alone never will. Conservation structures are part of that optionality. In some cases, preserving certain land characteristics can create financial value while aligning with long-term stewardship goals. The important point is not the technical form, it is the mindset. Sophisticated ownership often monetizes the land's attributes, not just its animals.
Tax treatment is another reason affluent buyers study these properties carefully. Under the right structure and with expert guidance, a ranch may interact with taxes in ways that are more favorable than casual observers realize. That does not make it easy money. It makes it a planning-intensive asset. Even the property itself is not one simple blob economically. Improvements, structures, and certain systems can behave differently from raw land on the financial side. Owners who understand that nuance can make better decisions about what to build, when to build, and how to think about payback. Timing matters as much as structure. When capital enters, how long it stays, what improvements happen, and how eventual transitions are handled can materially shape the owner's experience. The deeper lesson is that wealthy buyers often win here through patience and planning, not through heroic annual ranch profits. For some families, the ranch is also an intergenerational tool. It can hold memory, identity, and capital inside the same asset. That combination is powerful because it changes the measurement period. If the horizon is decades, the property can be judged very differently than if it must impress every year. This is where patient capital has a real advantage. A buyer who does not need the ranch to produce immediate strong cash flow can absorb the slow years differently. The property becomes a long-duration store of value with utility attached, rather than a machine that must constantly prove itself.
That's one reason affluent owners play the game differently. They can survive a weak ranch year because the ranch is not their only source of liquidity. When outside cash supports the holding period, the owner can wait, improve, and think strategically instead of reacting defensively to every rough season. Liquidity changes behavior. Owners with room can make better decisions because they are not forced into the least bad option under pressure. They can rest pastures, hold inventory longer, invest in smarter improvements, or simply avoid panic. In capital-intensive businesses, optionality often comes from cash more than courage. And yes, lifestyle still matters. The point is not that enjoyment is fake. The point is that enjoyment alone usually does not justify the economics. For the strongest buyers, lifestyle is the companion benefit. The financial logic is what makes the lifestyle sustainable in the first place. That is why a high-end ranch can function less like a straightforward farm and more like a wealth preservation vehicle with operational baggage attached. The land may be doing one job for the balance sheet, while the livestock and operations are doing another job for the property itself. Seen through that lens, livestock can become one piece of a broader strategy. They may support grazing management, preserve the character of the land, and keep the property functionally active. Their economic role may still matter, but it is no longer the whole story or even the main one. This distinction is crucial. A ranch can be only okay as an annual operating business and still make sense for a particular owner because ownership goals extend beyond annual operating profit.
Once you separate those two scorecards, the behavior of wealthy buyers becomes much easier to understand. The best capitalized owners often do exactly that. They stack uses. They let the land serve several compatible purposes at once, each one modestly improving resilience or utility. No single stream has to be magical. The advantage comes from patient design, not from a single brilliant trick. They also look past the obvious. Instead of seeing only pasture and cattle, they ask what other attributes the land carries: water, habitat, access, scenery, adjacency, or future use flexibility. Hidden value often lives in the property's characteristics, not merely in its current surface activity. Water deserves a second mention because sophisticated buyers often treat it as far more than a convenience. It influences production, resilience, flexibility, and eventual marketability. In some settings, control of water is part of what turns plain land into strategically important land. Exit timing matters too. A ranch bought emotionally and sold impatiently can disappoint badly. A ranch bought carefully and held through the right window may tell a very different story. In illiquid assets, the beginning and the ending often matter almost as much as the middle.
Improvement choices shape that future. Smart owners spend where utility compounds: water reliability, access, handling efficiency, habitat quality, durable buildings. Weak owners overspend where emotion shines brightest. On a ranch, some upgrades improve the asset. Others simply decorate the holding period. Local politics and land use rules belong in the analysis too. A ranch is not a floating island. Its future can be influenced by roads, regulations, neighboring development, and changing community priorities. The owner controls a lot, but never everything that will shape eventual value. Long horizon buyers increasingly think in resilience terms. How will this land behave under hotter summers, shifting rainfall, or more variable conditions? The ranch is still a hard asset, yes, but hard assets live inside real environments, and real environments do not stay static. There is also the simple reality that the buyer pool can be narrow. Unique assets often attract passionate buyers, but they may not attract many of them at once. That can support prestige while reducing liquidity, which is another reason patient ownership matters so much in this category. So what does a disciplined approach actually look like? It begins by underwriting the property's function before celebrating its mood. Water, carrying capacity, access, flexibility, reserves, and management quality deserve harder scrutiny than the view, even if the view is what got your attention.
It also means asking practical questions that romance tends to hide. How much of this land truly works? How costly is it to maintain? What breaks first in a bad year? Which improvements create real flexibility? Serious buyers look for fragility before they pay for beauty. Above all, disciplined buyers respect the need for reserve capital. They assume setbacks will happen. They budget for repair clusters, weak markets, and weather stress. That mindset does not remove risk, but it prevents the property from becoming financially dangerous the first time reality behaves like reality. Management may be the most underrated variable of all. The right manager protects the owner from drift, delay, and self-deception. The wrong manager can make a beautiful asset quietly underperform for years. In a business this spread out, trustworthy execution is one of the rare true multipliers. Good owners also think in scenarios, not just averages. Averages flatter capital-intensive businesses because they smooth the ugly years into something abstract. Scenarios force the harder question. If 2 or 3 things go wrong together, do I still like this property and my ability to carry it? And they define success up front. Is this property meant to maximize annual cash yield, preserve capital, create family experiences, support tax planning, or combine several goals imperfectly? Confusion here causes years of frustration. Clarity turns trade-offs from disappointments into conscious design choices.
So if someone wants a ranch mainly because they imagine smooth income, this is where the fantasy needs revision. Land businesses can be rewarding, but they rarely become simple just because the landscape is beautiful. Beauty softens the feeling. It does not soften the math. If the goal is lifestyle, that can absolutely be valid, but the strongest version of that choice usually comes when the owner can afford to treat the lifestyle as the result of a broader capital strategy, rather than asking the ranch itself to fully pay for the dream.
The toughest ownership experiences often come from the same recipe: too much emotion, too little liquidity, too much leverage, and not enough operational respect. None of those mistakes require bad intentions. They only require underestimating how serious this asset class really is. That's the nuance worth keeping. A ranch is neither a guaranteed financial winner nor just an indulgent toy. In the right hands, with the right structure, it can be a durable and meaningful asset, but it rewards realism far more reliably than it rewards romance. In the end, the deepest lesson is simple. The land is usually the anchor. Everything else, animals, infrastructure, side income, even the lifestyle, either supports that anchor or depends on it. Once you understand that hierarchy, the economics of owning a ranch become much clearer.